Thanks.
All right, well, what we wanted to do is kind of give you a quick overview of the climate change forum that we held a couple weeks ago with the Cumberland Conservation Collaborative. Some good information shared there. And there were some suggestions at the meeting. Someone needs to assume leadership for this. There was a suggestion made at the meeting the county should assume leadership for this. So that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk more about the findings of the climate change forum, some of the data that was out there, and then how that may relate to what we're doing at the county. And do we want to do more, do we want to do less, or maybe status quo? So we'll just kind of what we've experienced here. This is some of the data from the professionals at the climate change forum, that first block. So we had DCNR, National Weather Service, and Susquehanna River Basin Commission there. Some reputable organizations. None of this was politically leaned in any way. It was just presenting the data. So what we're seeing in the county is that since the beginning of the 20th century, temperatures have risen about 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit. We've seen the largest seasonal increase in the winter of 2.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're seeing these larger seasonal increases. And then we also experienced these greater degrees of a high frequency of warm nights. So that's a number of days with a minimum temperature above 70 degrees. So we're seeing that during that most recent 5-year period of 2010 to 2014, that's the highest frequency in Pennsylvania we've seen. And that's double the longer term average.
Where does data come from?
This is coming from National Weather Service.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of this data too, you'll see was in the Pennsylvania's climate action plan. So DEP prepared. So the bottom line, the message is when temperatures start getting warmer. I think that the first bullet there is the key. The second one there, precipitation. So we're getting warmer precipitation-wise. We're seeing more precipitation. So the trend over the last 50 years was that we're seeing increases in precipitation and increased volatility, and we're seeing more drought, more heavier and intense rains. 2018 was the wettest year on record. Obviously, we're talking about climate, so climate's long-term. 1 year is a blip on that radar, but again, trending in the right direction. And we've also set some extreme snowfall records for 1, 2, and 3-day events in the last 30 years. So the takeaway, I think, at a high level, getting warmer, getting wetter. So what's that mean? Under there, what can we expect in the future? See, the heat waves will increase, poor air quality, heat stress, may hit some of our residents. Infrastructure, may become stressed if we see increases in temperature with electric, mainly for cooling. And we're also seeing range shifts too. There's some interesting information there on different animal species, including invasive species that are kind of moving. Ticks was one of the things that was mentioned. The general from DCNR said that the highest workman's comp claim right now in DCNR is Lyme disease. So you can see that for ticks. So that was interesting. So you see this and realize that as we get a little warmer, it does make it more conducive to ticks and some of the other invasive like that. Precipitation, I think tonight we have a meeting with FEMA on our floodplain maps. So I think the potential to increase in the frequency and intensity of precipitation events that leads to flooding. Obviously, there's impacts to agriculture, ecosystems, and especially in Cumberland County, our outdoor-related tourism. It was interesting that they showed some slides from Erie, where they had a trail system in Erie, and they showed a picture in the middle of the summer it was underwater. And they said they've had to close some of their trail systems because of the amount of rain and increase of precipitation events and the intensity. And then energy too. We're going to see greater demand for energy for air conditioning, for irrigating water, potential impact in the future. So what we want to talk about today is what should we do? As a county, again, at the forum there was a suggestion, maybe the county should do this. Not sure what lead this was, but we wanted to look internally at what we're doing now, how it may relate to climate change, and then discuss with the board if there's anything further that you would like staff to look into. So first thing we do is nothing, just let it go, move on. We can conduct some further studies to understand the causes and potential solutions for climate change. So we're doing that now with our hazard mitigation plan. That'll be done here probably first quarter of next year. We have a climate change chapter as part of that, so we'll better understand climate change in the county a little more. Continue to raise awareness and educate with whether it be for residents or municipalities or businesses that some of the information that the state's sharing, share that back to them as well. And then the fourth thing I think is really important, that we can examine our county operations to look at what we're already doing and quantify how that relates to, climate change. So I think we're doing a lot of good things in the county that relate to greenhouse gas emissions. So, look at energy efficiency and usage. John's setting the gold standard for that in our county, for statewide as well. Our vehicle fleet, can look at emissions with that. Employee and resident travel, so we're working with transit, even carpooling within the county, there's impacts to greenhouse gas there. Recycling and waste initiatives, we can quantify how much material we've kept out of landfills. Improvement of water quality, Carl and his shop, water shop, stormwater management, there's a lot we're doing there to manage and adapt to some of the impacts of climate change. There's a lot we can do on land use planning as well, promoting more compact development, green infrastructure, low impervious cover to address some of the hydrologic impacts of climate change. And then the parks, trails, greenways, all that stuff I think plays into it. And I think the other thing that we could potentially do, share this Cumberland County example with our municipal partners, businesses, residents, encourage them to take action as well. So I think we're doing a lot. Some folks may look and say, what's the county? We are. We are. And we're doing a lot to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, but maybe we haven't communicated that as well. The other option too, we could do a more formalized climate action plan. The state's done that, some counties have done that there, see what others are doing. Really quantify the greenhouse gas emissions that are within a certain jurisdiction, and then setting goals for how far you want to reduce that, and then the techniques to do it. So that's another step that we could look at potentially in the future. But you can see that the state DEP released their climate action plan in 2018. Chester and Montgomery County are working on either climate action plan reports or greenhouse gas reduction reports. So we have some other municipal government, City Lancaster, City of Philadelphia, and then some at State College as well that are looking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So again, we just wanted to kind of give an overview of the takeaways from the forum, throw some ideas on there of what potentially we could do, and then if the board has any guidance back to us of what you'd like to see, do more, do less, status quo, you'd be interested in hearing that.
Kurt, the Energy Star Award we get, is there something similar that a township could do? Like, do we have like a model ordinance? Because I see a couple of townships here have passed resolutions to reduce the greenhouse gas effect. Is that a possibility?
I don't know. That's something we'd have to ask John. I think what we're doing here, that back 2012 or whatever it was, we had that energy efficiency money. If you remember that, Gary, remember that. We did inventories of our county facilities, how much energy we're using, did audits. A lot of our municipalities, I don't think, have done that. And that's something that could be, sharing our example here, it's a huge money saver. And for municipalities, they're as cash strapped as anybody. So yeah, sharing that experience may be something that would be worthwhile.
Yeah, townships like Hopewell, they wouldn't be interested, no reason to, but maybe the more South Middleton, North Middleton, Hamptons.
A lot of these things, including ours with the capital improvements related to efficiency, were driven by state grants. So are those grants still out there and available to the municipalities? Are they aware of them? Of course, that money not exist anymore. I mean, I'm not in favor of us necessarily offering a bucket of money, but we should start to see what's available, make sure that everybody's taking advantage of it to the extent they can. You aware of it?
I think some of them are still out there. A lot of the energy efficiency money from the feds has gone away.
That's I figured.
When you look at some of the other grant monies that are out there, maybe Carl and Shaw working on a lot of the BMPs, and some of that money's still out there. It's a matter of some of the stuff is dual purpose. So we're out there, we're improving water quality for farmers, but it also has an impact on climate change as well.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we've been doing for years, we didn't do it under the umbrella of addressing climate change.
Right.
It's just good stewardship, but it does have an enormous impact on
That's it. I think from the forum, probably one of the biggest takeaways was, there's tons of arguments on either side of the fence for climate change. Is it happens, not, how bad is it? But I think as we looked at this, there's practical things that we're doing now that have a benefit to Cumberland County. Whether or not it's going to solve climate change, we don't know. But we know what we're doing here has benefits to the county.
I think the only thing here that we haven't actively discussed is this, and you were part of this, but we've had the presentation regarding the county adoption, potential adoption of more renewable energy. John Lopp did his assessment and stated that it was more feasible somewhere down the line. And I guess I think the commissioners all uniformly expressed some interest in maybe looking at that a little harder to see whether we did as robust an analysis as it demands. So I think there are some opportunities for us to move to renewables that might be helpful to us as well as the community at large. And to me, it has to be both. So do you have a strong feeling on that? I mean, we saw that other counties, I mean, Route 2 was in first and they showed
So
us
that
a
one,
problem.
Route 2 issue didn't go anywhere then?
Well, there was a second contractor, and essentially then what we did was refer it to John Lobb Facilities to essentially do an analysis and say, you know, is this, and he went over it, and he came and presented us his methodology, and his conclusion essentially was, this could make a lot of sense, but right now is probably not the time, and I don't recall his exact reasoning on that. So it's kind of on the shelf, you know, but I'm not sure that the commissioners felt, and I think I'm capturing what everybody said, but I know it's how I feel, is that maybe we could have looked at that a little harder. I think there's an opportunity there, because part of what we do also is, you know, we're in a position as a public entity to help create that market for renewables. So I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of us doing it and then having to subsidize it. It doesn't make economic, financial sense for us, that I'm not necessarily in favor of doing it. But I think if other municipalities, other counties have found ways to introduce renewables and to make it work for them, then maybe we should take a harder look and see if that potentially applies to us as well. So John did his due diligence, but maybe a harder look would be what I would. I'd like to know, at least know more about how he reached some of those conclusions, and then, you know, put it back to the commissioners in terms of, you know, is this something we are willing to invest in? Is this something that's, you know, are there other questions we have? Are there other angles to look at this that might justify? There's so many entities, public, that have gone into renewables. Some of them are heavily subsidized. Some of them are dependent on the state grants that may or may not exist anymore. But you know, every public entity that goes into this is helping sustain that industry and creating more of a market for these companies that we're going to rely on, because a lot of this is going to be solved by technology and private industry, but somebody has to buy the stuff.
Just a couple of questions, and I did follow up a little bit on what Gary said, is I think we need to be attuned to whatever state and or federal incentives are available relative to renewable and or, you know, the possibility for us to possibly consider, you know, conversion of solar energy for some of our energy need. And I do think that Vince made a good point. You know, about every year now, we seem to, you know, get this Energy Star award where the only courthouse in Pennsylvania that received the award this year, and won a few around the nation. So, you know, I think we need to tell the story as well with respect to how that impacts the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and how Cumberland County has done its part over the past decade. The good thing about that program is, in fact, that it was supposed to pay for itself over a 15-year period. It actually paid for itself in 7 years. So we are reaping the cost savings benefits here in Cumberland County of all that we've done to kind of become more energy efficient, you know, here at the courthouse. What I want to ask though is, you know, are we, based on the fact that we know it's going to be warmer, based on the fact that we know it's going to be wetter, at least that's what we're saying, are we taking that into account with respect to our review of our plans? In other words, we have, you know, I remember when the township board commissioner, you know, 1 year floodplain, right, or whatever. And it seems like with some of our development, we seem to have 100-year floods every other year, you know what I mean? Now, so are we providing that kind of expertise, advice back to the municipalities when they're faced with these plans? I mean, how do we handle that in terms of, you know, in other words, because I think we're seeing, you know, been a lot more situations where there's more flooding, in residential areas or other areas of the county. When we get, especially these heavy downpours, like some of what we've seen, where we get, it seems like we got, so many incidents, like during the course of the year where we have not just a half inch of rain, but we have like 2 or 3 inches of rain. It's like coming down. And of course, we know we had that situation here in Cumberland County with the farm owner, right? His field ended up getting flooded out here. We still haven't really, I don't know whether we've really reached a conclusion on that. That whole issue. So that's what I'm saying in terms of our planning. Are we up to date with our planning?
I can speak to the floodplain management, or we can speak to the stormwater. But on the floodplain side, we have updated the floodplain maps for FEMA. My understanding is when they redid the floodplain maps, they were taking in more current precipitation data, more current topographic data, and more current data on obstructions to the waterways to make sure that the floodplains are more accurate. So I would say yes on that front. Longer term, I think that's why you look at the floodplain maps on a regular basis. The last time we did it was 2009. Probably as we progress even further, I think you may see more changes to that. Stormwater management front, I'm not.
I don't think anything really changed there, but, it seems like, you're planning for the worst storms, and like I said, it's happening more often, but I don't think any adjustments in the calculations and everything has happened yet.
It just strikes me that that would be in the works because, more intense storm activity, more runoff. We already have serious runoff issues, compliance issues with nitrogen and all that. The more runoff you have, the more out of compliance we're going to be. The more of these episodic problems, like the one farm that you mentioned, are going to happen. That's not going to be the exception to the rule. That's going to be.
Right.
So it just strikes me as a little unusual. And is there, going back to what Jim was discussing, on our own facilities, now areas like public safety, we have to harden our towers and even the building. There's new standards that are in place, and some of that is driven by the expectation of more harsh weather. But we haven't done that for everything. So do we need to, have we identified any needs? Has John studied that? Does anybody know as to what things we might need to do to mitigate impacts on our own facilities?
No, I mean, I think for Allen Road,
Yeah.
we have all the BMPs out there, the Carl Newshop put in, so we're probably good there, but for
Yeah.
the other facilities, probably not.
I mean, that's something we probably.
Yeah, that can be used as an example of stormwater BMPs that can be used on other facilities, rain gardens, infiltration trenches to handle the stormwater runoff, and the porous pavement, stuff like that. That works. It really works.
I mean, there's municipal entities all over this country that are doing that and a lot more. I just saw last week, for instance, in Cape Canaveral, Florida, that they have their hospital, which essentially sits out on a causeway and it's totally surrounded by water. Now, they were looking at how the fact that the hospital needed updating, and the Health First company that owns the hospital just said, you know what, when we take into consideration rising water levels and everything, we're just going to demolish this building and build a new one. So they moved into a more, weather-resistant location. And they're looking ahead, obviously, and based on numbers coming out of various agencies, they're planning on this as an inevitability. And I don't think we're going to have to relocate a building because we're not sitting on water. But it does show you that it's driving decisions by governmental bodies now on their capital expenditures.
As part of our hazard mitigation process, too, looks at that. So we have what we call critical facilities, government facilities, others, public safety, things like that. So I think this is the first year we have a climate change chapter in our hazard mitigation plan. So I think we're going to see that integrated more as we move forward to make sure that we're going to see increases in stormwater, increases in flooding, are there impacts into our critical facilities that need to be moved.
But we have to actionize that stuff because at least, and maybe this has changed, but my exposure to hazard mitigation plan has typically been, it's more of a compliance issue to say, yeah, we looked at it, yeah, we considered it, yeah, we're not, but it doesn't necessarily involve adoption of specific mitigation strategies.
Actually, it does.
It
Yeah,
does
it
now?
does. Yeah, I think you'll see a difference in the hazard mitigation plan this year too. We did it in-house this year.
Yeah.
In the past, we've had consultants
Yep.
do it for it. Admittedly, I think it was light on mitigation strategies. This year, we're working with Bob and his team to improve the strategies so they're more practical. And we are pointing to some issues that we can look at every year through the theme of there's money left on the table for some of these projects. So I think our goal is to get some of those projects into our plan and then actually try and pursue some of them. So then they can address some of the issues of climate change that are out there, that's hardening facilities or even green infrastructure, deal with more of the stormwater management stuff.
Kurt, what then would be the difference between a hazard mitigation plan and a climate action plan?
Sure. So a hazard mitigation plan looks at all the natural man-made hazards facing the county and lays out a strategy to reduce loss of life and property
Okay.
for each of those. The climate action plan would look pretty much at greenhouse gas emissions and determine what the inventory is in the county, how much greenhouse gases we're emitting, and then strategies to reduce that.
Unfortunately, a lot of this boils down to, in the public debate today, there's a great deal of emphasis on symbolism. And there are calls for municipalities to set some grand goal, our county's gonna be X percentage of renewables, or not the county government, the entire county. But there's no real opportunity to actionize that stuff. And like, that's why when I see all these people with their sustainability plans, et cetera, I think these things are aspirational. It's like, wouldn't this be nice? But they're really lacking in terms of how to achieve that. So I would hope that whatever we do puts more emphasis on action items that are achievable and legitimate, and a little less on than what some of these other folks are doing with setting lofty goals and using lofty language, but not necessarily really achieving what we say we're going to achieve. So. I think the renewables thing is something I definitely like to look at. And honestly, the other thing I wrote down when I was thinking of this was, since you mentioned about vehicle fleet, we haven't really discussed that, but is it time for us to consider, do we move to liquefied natural gas? Do we move to electric vehicles? And granted, that cycle of replacement for vehicles is pretty substantially long, but it seems like that should at least start to be baked into our future planning for certainly transportation.
Well, you say, look, if we look ahead to transit regionalization with rapid transit, we have a CNG plant in New York County that they put in for their fixed route bus system. Well, as we look at regionalization, I think our property on Allen Road is really going to be looked at as a potential hub for fixed route and shared ride like it is now. There'll be opportunities then to do CNG out here that could fuel the bus fleet, but also work in the county too. So there are discussions, again, things that we're already doing, we continue to do, and if we need to raise the banner of climate change, we're addressing that, we can, and show that we are doing something.
One of the things I know was discussed by at least one of the candidates for the election, Giselle, was that the county could be more active in promoting charging stations. Do we have any information on, say, the adoption rate of electric vehicles so that we would know? And if we were to look at that, I would assume that perhaps there might be public monies available to help with the rollout of something like that. So, to me, I don't know the answers to this, and I know you guys don't necessarily know the answers, you may have opinions on it, but we should have a process in place by which we are considering these things so that they're on the table. So we're not sitting here 4 years ago going, oh yeah, why didn't we think about that? Especially when there's like fleet replacement, county fleet.
Kirk, how many townships have revised their land use plan to be more green friendly? Like I believe Middlesex did it, I know Silver Spring did it. Are there others out there that should be doing it that haven't?
Yes, I think we have to go back and look at it. Some of
Yeah,
those
I know.
changes can be small,
I know.
but I think to a municipality that everyone we work with, they do look at these issues when they're updating the ordinances and starting to think more, especially like on the green infrastructure, park trails and greenways, trying to figure out how to integrate that into the land development process. preserve critical lands. I think they're thinking about that now more than they have in the past. Adding this discussion to it too is saying, hey, some of this stuff's happening, you know, encouraging them to do something, I think raises up the bar a little higher for them and maybe raises the urgency too.
And you did something recently, wasn't it a model ordinance or something on municipalities to help them prepare for like land use issues regarding solar and wind?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just a model ordinance. Has that been pushed out at all?
Yeah, yes. We did that, how long ago?
A couple years
Okay,
ago,
so
yeah.
Steph actually wrote those.
It keeps coming up again every now and then, we keep pushing it out.
We've seen a lot of municipalities adopt that.
What's that?
A lot of municipalities have adopted.
Oh, okay, good. I mean, are there other opportunities in that? It seems that some of the, like for solar, you gotta have a space.
Mhm.
So some of your municipalities that are maybe not as experienced in some of the land use documents or don't have documents that are quite as mature or robust in like professional standards, they would be the ones who would be the potentially largest target areas for the rollout of some of these. So is there anything we can do to ensure that those opportunities are, those municipalities are well positioned for those opportunities if they come up?
Sure. I think probably the best thing here is when we're working with the municipalities, in many cases, they're asking us to help write the ordinances or provide input. And we're getting,
Okay.
we're writing them into, if we're writing them, we're putting that on the table. If not, we're suggesting.
So they're suggesting that. Well, I think this is one of the areas too where your shop is really ahead of the curve in terms of promoting the updating of, you know, it's not the high glamour stuff, but updating documents for a lot of these municipalities that aren't necessarily that haven't done it a lot in the past. So it does give us a lot of opportunities to address this and a range of other issues. So that was very forward.
So Kurt, is your recommendation, or is it already done, is to update the hazard mitigation plan to include that climate change?
That's in process.
That's in process. Stephanie, we were at a presentation, South Mountain Partners, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
They had a guy from DCNR who was, I thought his presentation was outstanding. And he was talking about how northern Pennsylvania, some of the trees are going to die out because it's too warm and the different varieties are going to take over. And whether it means anything or not, and I think he said that if we added no more CO2 to the atmosphere for the next 30 years, it wouldn't change. It would take 30 years for it to actually come down, the amount of CO2. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that specific stat, but that gentleman was actually part of the climate change forum
Okay.
that was co-hosted, and he sort of
Great.
did a mini version of that, and,
Okay.
and I think quite frankly, he was probably the highlight of the presentation. He had some really good practical information about what's happening in our state parks.
Right.
Yeah, I read an article where you're talking about the rising temperatures, and so it's allowing bacteria and fungi to grow, and that's killing some of the evergreens and everything, so it's affecting, you know, whole landscape, that's for sure.
Invasive plants that were previously just in the south, that just keep creeping their way up
Yeah.
north.
So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, even though we should certainly do our best to reduce CO2, I think we also need to look at it and say, hey, it's already happening, we're not gonna be able to change it short term. What can we do to address it? Anything, you know? And I don't know if there's an answer to that. Plant more trees.
Yeah.
I mean, that's some of the simple things that we're already encouraging
That's
through our
true, 'cause they suck
ordinances.
up
Is, yeah,
CO2.
yeah.
Mhm. And the excess water that we shorted out last year, the more trees you had and everything, was a little more.
With that in mind, is there anything, how do we, you know, it's a growing county, we've talked about the loss of open space and such, but is there anything in place that helps address the loss of forest land? And, you know, as opposed to going out and planting new trees, why don't we work harder keeping the ones we got?
I mean, that's certainly some of our zoning ordinances can help protect, there's tree protection standards or
Okay.
Conservation districts on like North Mountain or South Mountain that would limit again the amount of trees that you can cut down. But there's probably opportunities for those plans to be, or those ordinances to be more stringent, that's
Yeah, if we want to talk about ecological damage, I mean, really, our biggest thing here really is loss of habitat driven by postal development and impacts, indirect impacts of development. So, forest land and meadows are something that I think get too little attention in terms of conservation efforts. You know, as a growing county, those are tremendously impacted here in Cumberland. I'm just not aware of what tools we have to address those things.
There's incentive programs out there for buffers, you know, along streams and
Yes.
everything. It's just getting that landowner to buy into it, to see the benefits of the buffers and everything. That's a tough sell. It's a tough
So,
sell.
You're talking about repairing.
Yeah, riparian forest buffers.
Can't you do that yourself as a property owner?
You can,
Yeah.
sure.
I remember my dad on the farm, I hate cutting grass now. When I got old enough to cut grass, he said, don't ever cut the grass on the back of that creek that runs through.
Right.
I could never understand why. He
Right.
explained it to me, and I was like, damn.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's something that a property owner can do, him,
Sure.
first.
But if they, you know, like I said, if they need incentive, there's programs out there like the 10 Million Trees, Bay Foundation promoting, there's a lot of organizations that are promoting that. If, you know, if we can get that landowner in touch with that, if they don't want to do it on their own, there are incentives out there that'll pay for the tree, pay for the shelter.
And that actually addresses one of the things we're up against, which is just prevailing attitudes toward like, I have to mow this.
Right.
You know, and there was an interesting article in the Post, I think I've referenced in the past meetings here, in Washington Post a few years ago, about some places are allowing for more, going to the idea of retention meadows, they're allowing more of a liberal standards when it comes to mowing. Mowing less, they have areas set aside that are meant to be, you know, natural areas, which are, you know, have a huge number of ecological benefits. So, but people are, even in the cities that have adopted this, there's been a pushback because like, oh, it looks terrible. You know, we can't have that. We would mow everything, you know, into pristine standard because that's,
Sure.
you know, what we've become.
And
used
I
to.
assume some ordinances for municipalities have that too, where they want that grass gets so high, it has to be mowed.
Oh, yeah, there's a ton of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it came up when we were discussing the mowing here out of Claremont and such, and we talked about the gardening, and I mentioned at that point about, can we leave more of it as a natural meadow state?
Right.
And, I don't know if I ever got the answer. I wondered that, but that happens a lot, so. I have one last question, and, which is, one of the observations you made, I think, is very astute, and that is, a lot of this is already done. It just does not fall under a singular umbrella. And what we've done here is pull a lot of these things under a singular umbrella, you know, for our own examination purposes. But we do not have a repository, a program, or anything under which all of this is that we can point to and say, this is our plan. We do lack some of that symbolic value I talked about earlier. Symbolism has its pluses. It's what I have a problem with symbolism that has a void of actionable items. So we have the actionable items. Is there a task force? Is there some other structure, either within county government, outside of county government, that can take ownership of this and have something of a coordinated approach to this that we could participate in or coordinate ourselves? Is there a better way to organize this?
Sure. Yeah, so I think a couple of thoughts on that. We have to determine what we want our role to be. And so like, you know, do we want to be in charge? We want to be the leaders? We could do something just for county government and county operations, which we have direct control over. We could do something countywide, invite municipalities, businesses, and others to participate in and kind of spread the burden of implementation of, you know, track some businesses are doing or other municipalities. So yeah, I think there's options there. And again, we just have to figure out what we want our role to be. I think, you know, if we don't have a climate action plan, I think we could put one together rather simply. I don't need the robust plan that's 300 pages long.
Right,
But
exactly.
identify some key areas of greenhouse gas reduction and initiatives that we're doing. Plug in some of the the work we're already doing and track some of that. And then, there's other things too. I mean, we're not doing everything that we could.
Right, we should identify opportunities, but we
Right.
should also identify what we've already done that's been
Yeah.
successful.
So there might be, we can look internally again, look at some other opportunities outside of what we're already doing. If we wanted to do something on a bigger scale countywide, I think that's when we start thinking more aspirational
Yeah.
as to what we in conjunction with our partners could do at a bigger scale.
Well, my personal opinion as one commissioner is that we shouldn't necessarily own this issue in the broad sense. And there are other partners out there who are doing things, and there's the potential for even more partners to be doing things. And I think that would be a far better approach anyhow. So, but we should be open to maybe participating in some things. But we should own what our county government does. And I have no problem with that we organize it in such a way. It might be a topic that when the new board is seated, that we might want to spend a little time on, generate some ideas, and you would be part of that. I think Locke would have to be part of that, obviously. So.
I think that's a good starting place. So, you look at the state's climate action plan, there's recommendations, these things, lead by example. So if we start with county operations and look at what we're doing, take credit for what we're doing, identify some other opportunities, then we can share that example to others. Dickinson's doing a lot of work on this, and the Shippensburg University's doing a lot on this. So as it grows, there might be other organizations that want to put together something that's a little larger that we can participate in. But in the meantime, we could share the example of what we're doing here with our municipalities, other businesses, saying, this is working for us and being working for them.
I think that's a good approach. Jim, anything?
No, I mean, I would just agree with the direction what we're talking about here. I mean, I think that county can play a leadership role in identifying practical, cost-effective solutions on to what we can be doing at a local level, and then sharing that information and collaborating with our other units of local government here in Cumberland County. I think that unfortunately there's a lack of leadership at the national level on this issue. So it's kind of like, okay, nothing's getting done there. So what can we do, because we know we have a problem, we got to address the problem. But a lot of this gets kicked around in terms of costs, right? It's going to cost us a fortune, whatever. Well, I don't know that we're really, searching for those, cost-effective solutions, and that's where we should be. I think, those things that we can identify that we can do here, at least to, hopefully get us to a better place. Just being a realist, I mean, we've got a problem. Houston, we've got a problem. And it's not going to be solved overnight, like Vince said. I mean, some of these things we could do, and we may not see the impact. And we're certainly not an island unto ourselves, so I mean, we can't solve this the climate issue ourselves, but we can do our part. And again, I think there are a lot of things that we're already doing that probably the public doesn't know about, and/or that could be emulated by others. They kind of like the idea of bringing our business community into this, like the idea of bringing other partners into it. But we could, I think Cumberland County could play a leadership role in help us to address the issue. So, bless you.
Thank you.
So, any thoughts?
This is a fine outline. It's a very good, very a lot of good stuff.
So from our side then, talking about getting back to the new board seat, getting back together, picking up the issues, so between now and maybe we can scope out
Yeah.
some of these things, a little more detail, just talk about what we're
Yeah.
doing, maybe put it in the framework of kind of a countywide plan on this, and we'll get some more discussion with the board. And, John's not here today, we get him involved too, so that we have some more discussion on this.
I think that sounds like a very good approach. Just one other issue on that is, I know that with the strategic planning process that CAG's going through now, some of these issues are also on their radar. I know you're going to be part of that. So we may be able to piggyback on some of them. They're looking for opportunities where they can address these issues in a business-friendly way and maybe generate some opportunities with with industries that could be located here. And what generated some of that discussion was to talk about you'll remember this years ago, idle air, talk about the anti-idling things, machinery, and that company doesn't exist anymore, but the remnants were bought by another company. And we were discussing other things we can do about the diesel emissions issues in the near term, rather than just waiting for the new standards and new technologies to take over. So there's the chair of the board there, Crystal, has some experience in this, and she's just full of ideas on things that Katie could do. So we don't want to operate in isolation, and you'll be part of that process. So there may be some things there we can build on as well.
Yeah, the only thing I would just add is, be good if we could just, you know, be prepared to take advantage of opportunity, okay? I mean, and Gary touched on the electric charging stations. I mean, if everything we read in here is we're gonna all be driving around in electric vehicles coming up here in the next couple of years, right? So I think we need to be on, you know, at least be prepared to help to advance those technologies, you know, here in our county when it comes to pass. So, I mean, I don't know what that means in terms of, I think, you know, Katie playing a role in this is a big part of it, but, yeah, I mean, there's some opportunities out there in connection with all this stuff, so, I'm gonna try to be prepared to take advantage